Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 30, verse 15. So Moshe says, Re'ei nosati lefanecha hayom. See, I've placed before you today as hachayim v'yas hatov, life and good, v'yas hamaves v'yas hara, and death and bad. So we get the concept of choices. We get the concept of good choices versus bad choices. That's all clear. What's interesting here is he gives two terms that are presumably meaning good things, chayim, life, and tov, good, and two terms that presumably mean bad things, death and evil. What's the additional layer of having, these two terms? Couldn't you have just said, see, I've placed before you life and death, or good and bad? What do you need both choices? Seems like almost a redundancy. So let's see Rashi. Rashi and Pasuk Tesvav, Es HaChayim v'Es HaTov, Zeh Talui Bazeh. So he's clarifying it's actually a cause effect. Im Tas Tov, Harei L'cha Chayim. If you do good, you'll have life. Vim Tas Ra, and if you'll do bad, Harei L'cha Hamaves. You'll have death. So it's actually not. It is two choices, but one choice won't be your decision. It'll be your decision whether you're going to do good or bad. Understand that the result of doing good is life, and the result of doing bad is death. That's how Rashi explains it. Let's go over to the Sforno on Pasuk Tesvav. Es hachayim lo'ad. I am giving you an option of eternal life. V'es hatov ha'orev b'chayesha. And good means a pleasant life in the short term. V'es hamaves la'ad, or I can give you a choice of eternal death. V'es hara tsar chayesha. Bad is the pain of the short term. So whereas Rashi understands it as being a cause-effect relationship, I think the intent of the Sforno is something else. I think the intent of the Sforno is a very interesting statement. There are other sources in Torah that talk about this, that actually, if you do good things in this world, yes, you'll have reward in the next world, but your life in this world will be much better. Whether you say that God will reward in this world, but that we know is not a sure thing, but you'll have a much more fulfilling life. And that's the point. So understand that the good is all good in this world and in the next world. And the bad is all bad. Again, sometimes it's hard to see in the moment, but that's the idea according to this Sforno. Interesting shot. Okay, moving on to verse 17. If your heart turns away and you don't listen to Hashem, and you wander and you are pushed off, and you bow to other gods and you serve them. Verse 18, you're going to be destroyed if you do that. You won't have many days on the land that you cross the Jordan to go to. Okay, I just found a brief kliyakar on this pasuk that I just want to share. Kliyakar on pasuk Yud Zayin. Now, Yifneh doesn't really sound like a rebellion. Yifneh sounds like to turn away. Yifneh might even be decently translated as to become distracted. So if your heart turns away, says the Kliyakar, shetafne libcha levatala, that you turn your heart away to just sort of waste. V'lo kol hayamim b'avodas hakel yisbarach, and you don't always engage in growing in your service of God. Oz v'nidachta, you need to know that if you're not always engaged with how to serve God better and how to be better, the day will come where you're totally pushed away. Not that God is pushing you away, just you'll lose your spiritual momentum. If you lose your focus, you'll just kind of like slip away a little bit. And ultimately, it'll ultimately be so bad that you'll do avodah zarah. Because when you don't focus yourself on purposeful things, it brings to inappropriate activity. Just an interesting thing to think about in this time of year. I used to have a Rebbe in high school who always used to tell us that life is like an escalator going down. What does that mean? You can keep on walking up. And it's as long as you kind of go at a certain pace, even though the escalator is going down, you can end up at the top. But if you don't do anything, you just naturally go down. It's an interesting way of thinking about things. Okay, we're going to go on now to the next parsha. This is a double parsha, not a very long double parsha, but a double parsha nonetheless. Chapter 31, verse 1. Now, Parshas Nitzavim, and many things before Parshas Nitzavim, Moshe has been speaking to the Jewish people. There's no clear closure if you just glance for a second. Sorry, at least in my chumash, there's many pages back. If you look at verse 20 of chapter 30, Moshe is just talking to them that you should love God. There's no real closure. There's no like Moshe went home. Moshe sent them home. There's nothing like that. And yet, chapter 31 begins with Vayelech Moshe. Moshe went. And he spoke these words to all the Jewish people. Went where? He's been speaking to them the whole time. So why does it say he went? A very basic question, but a fair one. Excuse me. So let's start with the Ramban on Pasuk Aleph. Kasher Hishlam Kol Dvarav. Moshe Rabbeinu finished all of his words. Az hochu kol anitzavim lefanav, va'anashim va'ataf ishla olav. Moshe finished the drasha. Everybody went home. There's no need to say, and they all went home. At the beginning of Parshas Nitzavim, the first parsha that we're dealing with this week, it said, Moshe said, you're standing before God to bring you into a covenant with God and to understand the curses of not fulfilling that covenant. So the mission statement for this speech is clear. It's to talk about the covenant and the potential punishments of not following the covenant. Moshe finished the discussion. It doesn't have to say they went home. It's understood that the conversation was over. V'achri Avram Babris, after he was finished discussing the covenant with them, they went home. V'yomer HaKasuv Ata, now the pasuk says, Ki Moshe halach mimachne Levia el machne Yisrael lichvodam. So up until now, Moshe was giving a drasha. So they came to his area, the camp of the Levi. Moshe was a Levi. Now Moshe wants to seek them out. So he actually goes to the broader camp of the Jewish people, the ring in which all the tribes were located. Now it's really goodbye. Up until now, it's when Moshe's been teaching and darshaning and saying, I'm going to leave this world, etc., etc. Now it's really, really, now it's time to say goodbye. And for that, Derech Eretz is that Moshe Rabbeinu seeks them out, not only with the idea of speaking to them, but the Derech Eretz is he comes to them. Interesting image to think about. Sforno on Pasuk Aleph. Vayelech Moshe, his orer lozeh. The Sforno says that Vayelech doesn't mean here Moshe walked, even though literally that's what it means. What he says Vayelech means is Moshe was moved to say the following. Just to give one of the examples, it says that Amram went and married Yocheved, the parents of Moshe. What does it mean he went? What did I think? Did I think like they both sat on their furniture at home and they magically became married? I mean, of course he went. So he says the pshat over there is he went is actually not that he picked up and walked, though he did. The pshat is he made a decision that this is what he was going to do. So the Sforno says that's the pshat here too. After he's finished talking about this covenant with God, his Israel al misaso. He now wants to give the Jewish people consolation regarding his death. This should be a joyous time for the Jewish people. They now have a great understanding of their covenant with God. And this is their life. Moshe Rabbeinu is going to die. He feels, it hits him that he has to give them a context for his death, a perspective for his death, because if he doesn't give them a context for his death, it's going to be this whole tragedy. They are going to miss him. but they're going to feel like they're rudderless. Actually, when you think about it, that's the whole thing that happened with the golden calf, right? It was this amazing moment of accepting the Torah, and then Moshe's still up at our scene, and they don't know what the story is, and they get nervous. So Moshe Rabbeinu realizes he has to prep them and give them a framework with which to process this. So this is his initiative. His job, so to say, was finished with Parshas Nitzavim, but then he says, I have to give them a way to look at my passing. That's what's going on here, says the Sforno. Really interesting pshat. And finally, let's see the Kli Yakar. Kli Yakar on Pasuk Aleph. Vayelech Moshe vaydaber sadvarim ha'ela. Kol Mefarshim nidchaku b'alichazu. All the Mefarshim, the commentators, are find difficulties in this walking. Kilo porash leichon halach. It doesn't say to where he walked. V'lin nefarish v'lin yira lefarshis of shnei panim. He has two ideas as to how to explain it. We'll see the first one. Echadu fisharatza Moshe lomar lo uchal od latzeis v'lavo. Moshe Rabbeinu was going to say to them, it's the next pasuk, I can't go anymore. I'm no longer able to go and to come. I'm not the one for you anymore. Umilas lo uchal yesh lo shnei panim. When he says I'm not able, it could mean two things. O lo uchal mamish b'bilti yicholes. It could mean I'm not physically able. That might be what it means. My doctor just gave me a thing and not able to walk back and forth. O lo uchal eni rashai. Maybe what it means I'm not able is I'm not licensed to lead you anymore. God won't let me lead you anymore. The real pshat here is he's saying to them, God has said my time is up. I'm physically able to walk around, but that's not the issue. The issue is that God has said I'm not going to lead you anymore. So it's a very novel pshat from the Kli Yakar. He says that Moshe Rabbeinu was worried that the people would process his statement, I can't go, as I'm physically unable. And that's a little bit more nerve-wracking, because that's just like, oh, really, Moshe is supposed to be leading us, but he no longer is able to, so I guess we'll do the next best thing. Let's find Yoshua. That's very different than God has said it's time for a new leader. Well, if God has said it's time for a new leader, it must be he's able. It must be our new leader will be able. He didn't want them to misunderstand what he was saying when he said, I'm not able. So Moshe, what did he do? Halach lefnei kol Yisrael b'zrizus la'arko l'rachba, says the Kli Yakar. He walked back and forth with great alacrity in front of all of them, lengthwise, widthwise, all over the place. Ki bozeh herolahem, because with this he's showing them, ki b'kocho oz kain ato leilech v'latzes v'level lefneim. He's perfectly fine, capable. So then it's evident what he means. I'm not able. I'm no longer licensed by God to do this. So that's the Kli Yakar's pshat. The Ramban says it means that he came to them because that was the derech eretz. He's saying goodbye to them. The Sforno says it really is not about walking at all. It's about that he realized he has to frame things for them. And the Kli Yakar says this pshat that he literally was walking around. He wanted to show them he was walking around to make it clear that the end of his leadership was not because he's not able, it's because there's a new plan. Okay. So we discussed that this morning, and we discussed Rashi the Sforno regarding life and good and death and bad, and we discussed the Kli Yakar on what it means to turn away from God.